and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on this edition, we get the latest on ties between Washington and Baghdad. This is the US issues a, quote, final warning to the Iraqi leadership over the presence of Iran-backed militants in the country. This warning comes as Iraq is set to hold parliamentary elections in less than a week from now. We'll be speaking to the Iraqi foreign minister. Plus, we'll get the latest on the conditions in which Palestinian prisoners have been held in Israel. Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin in the Middle East, where the US has issued a stern warning to Iraq. Disarm all Iran-backed militias or face consequences. Well, that warning comes just days before Iraq prepares for pivotal parliamentary elections. Well, the Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani has responded by saying he is committed to bringing all weapons under state control. But he insists that that cannot truly happen while a US-led coalition remains in Iraq, something he says many Iraqis see as a continued occupying force. Well, I'm very pleased to say we're joined now by the Iraqi Foreign Minister, Fuad Hussein, who joins us now from Erbil. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Minister. There are reports that the US Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has issued a warning to Baghdad, a serious warning, a final warning, he called it, about the presence of Iranian-backed militia groups in your country. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also issued such a warning. How seriously is Iraq taking this warning, and what's being done to address the issue?
I think the Secretary of Defense called our Minister of Defense, and they discussed this matter. That is serious. And of course, we are taking these warnings seriously. And I think the Prime Minister is on a daily basis in contact with various groups to discuss the position of United States towards these groups.
And what's your interpretation? Why do you think Washington is making a warning like this right now? Because some people are suggesting the US is poised to take some action in the region. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. You see, you may ask Washington about that, why they are doing it now. But it is obvious for us, it is not only now, but a while ago, and even the previous administration, they were talking about this issue. I think they are linking these groups with the Iranian influence, so that is the position. They have got a clear position towards Iran, and they think that the Iranian has got influence in Iraq through these groups.
Now, the United States has a newly appointed special envoy to your country, a man by the name of Mark Savaya. He says his mission is to support Iraq in moving towards full sovereignty. I'm wondering, what do you think he means by that?
I don't know. You may ask him, but anyhow, we are looking forward to working together with the envoy of President Trump, and we are ready for cooperating with him. And I think this is a good step, because at the end, that means President Trump is paying a lot of attention to the situation in Iraq, and he appointed one of the people who is close to him, and he can report directly to the White House. So I think this is a positive step for the Iraqis.
Minister Hussein, how would you describe the state of relations between Baghdad and the new administration of President Trump in Washington?
We have got a good relationship with Washington. I have been in Washington, and we had good discussion with Secretary of State, and we see regularly people from Washington or American in Baghdad. So our relationship is based on, in the first place, on the history the relationship between United States and Iraq. It goes back to 2003, but also to the fight against working together and cooperating together, fighting ISIS terrorists. So we have got a lot together to depend on. And besides that, we have got a framework agreement between Baghdad and Washington. So on the basis of history, but also on the basis of mutual interest, I see the relationship is quite good, it's normal. You see, in the past, the focus was on the security, but nowadays, because the security has been improved in Iraq. In fact, security is very good in Iraq. So the focus is on other fields, on having American companies in Iraq, thinking about working together in various fields, especially on energy, but also on health sector, on education sector. So there are various fields in which we are working together with the American side.
So you have good relations with Washington, and you talk about inward investment by the Americans in your country. And we began this conversation talking about Iranian influence on your country and the influence it has on not just the political landscape, but with these militia groups. Does Iraq have to choose, given that Iran and the United States are far from being allies? Do you have to choose? Is it Washington? Is it Tehran? Or can you have both?
No, you see, our foreign relationship depends on a few facts: geography, history, and interest. If we are talking about geography and history, geographically, we and the Iranian are neighbor, and historically we have many things in common, and culturally, of course. And we have a great interest to continue our good relationship with the United States. We consider the United States as an ally for Iraq. We are very frank with the Iranian side. They have got their problem with the American, but that's their problem. That's not our problem. We want to have good relationship with both. And if we can help between both sides, we will do that. We did it in the past sometimes. But nowadays, the tension is high. When the tension is high between Tehran and Washington, of course, it will affect us negatively. That's why we hope that there will be talks and negotiation between Tehran and Washington. However, the basis of our relationship is clear. And when we choose friends, we choose it frankly. Americans are our friends and our ally. And Iran is our neighbor, and we have got with the Iranian also very many issues, which has to do with the history, with culture. So we respect our relationship with the Iranian, but we keep also our good relationship with the United States.
When we look at what the United States has been doing and saying in, for example, a country like Lebanon, where there is a clear problem with Hezbollah and the United States, do you think it's likely the US views perhaps Iraq as potentially having a similar problem later on down the line, a Hezbollah-style problem, i.e. a state within a state that makes that country impossible to govern?
You see, it is not, the problems that we have has not to do with the United States or other countries. It is our internal problem. We have got a constitution, and we must be committed to this constitution, and the constitution doesn't allow groups working outside the state or not following the government. So we must go back to the constitution and be committed to the constitution. And when I am talking about we all Iraqis. So actually, this is, in the first place, an internal question. And I hope that during the coming time, we can solve it. And those groups, armed groups, who are functioning outside the authority of the government must understand that this is not allowed on the basis of the Constitution. So in the first place, it must be solved internally and within the Iraqi society.
I think our viewers will be very pleased to hear you say that the security situation in Iraq is vastly improved. That was a key point, because this is, we're now just a few days away, less than a week away from elections in Iraq. Those elections will take place next Tuesday, the 11th of November, the 6th election since the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. Yes. The average age of an Iraqi lawmaker is 55. And voters seem to be tired of sectarian politics, corruption, unemployment, poor services, especially access to electricity. Does it seem to you like Iraqi politics needs a reboot? And do you think these elections represent an opportunity for your country?
In the first place, we are very happy that the democratic process, step by step, has been widened and is continuing. It is not easy in Iraq, but also in the region, to build a democratic system and democratic process. However, as you mentioned, this is the 6th time that the Iraqi people are going to vote and to choose a new government. And this is, comparing with our history, Iraqi history, this is really exceptional, because in Iraqi political history, the change came always through coup d'etat and through military actions. So now we are far away from that phenomena. Do we have problem in our society? Yes. Do we have challenges? Yes. We have got various challenges. Some of them has to do with the region, but some of them has to do with the Iraqi society. One of the challenges that we are facing is deepening the democracy and exercising the democratic system in different way. Of course, the parliament is an important organization in any democratic system. So going to elect a new parliament is very important for us. That doesn't mean that we are going to solve all problems. We have got economic challenges. Our economy is depending heavily on oil revenue, and that depends on the oil price. So when oil price is going high, then our financially we are in good shape. When it goes down, then we have got problem. So diversifying our economy is one of the one of the point in our plan in the future. But also fighting corruption. Corruption is really a big challenge to our system. However, we are talking about that, we are recognizing that, and we are presenting plans to fight corruption. So we hope that within the next process, we can develop true tools to fight corruption. We are recognizing our problems. We are not saying that we don't have problems. We are recognizing all these problems that you have mentioned. But at the same time, people are free. People have got political parties. People are free to talk. People are free to organize demonstrations. In general, the development, economic development has been better. So there are also many positive aspects of this new democratic process in Iraq.
And just lastly, Minister, I mean, there are lots of young candidates presenting themselves in these elections. There are also going to be a lot of first-time voters. So the youth could be quite mobilized in these elections. What do you think they expect from you and from the country's political leadership?
One of the problems that we are facing has to do with, as I mentioned, an economic situation, unemployment, and unemployment among the youth is very high. Our economy, as I said, is depending heavily on oil income. So we are trying to diversify in the first place our economy, but also to support private sector. When the private sector, they will be stronger in our society and functional in our economy, I think it will be easier to find space for those youth to work, not only being and watching the government so that they can be an employee of the government, but also to go to the private sector. So we need to build our private sector in the coming years so that there will be work and a chance for work for the youth. So this is the main problem for the youth in our society.
Okay, well, we wish you well with those elections. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us here on Al Arabiya English. Iraq's Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Now, another story we're following for you today. Israel's parliament has moved forward with a bill that would allow for the execution of Palestinian prisoners believed to have committed deadly acts of terror. Well, this proposal was pushed by the Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and is backed by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself. Well, the plan has faced heavy criticism from human rights organizations who warn it breaks international law and that it would only inflame tensions further. Well, we're joined now by Qadura Fares, who is the former head of the Palestinian Prisoners Affairs Committee, who joins us now from Ramallah. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Mr. Fares. About 9,000 Palestinians, we're told, remain in Israeli custody. Many are being held without charges or without trial. What's the status of negotiations and the progress to bring about their release?
The negotiations have come to an end now, and there are no further negotiations for the release of the prisoners. As you know, the number of prisoners is roughly around 10,000, and we know that Israel has been always pursuing the enforced disappearance practices against those prisoners. Those negotiations, as I said, have come to an end, but this will, I think it is a moral and a humanitarian duty on all the the officials in the Palestinian Authority and other political factions in Palestine that they have to keep this cause at the heart of their agenda, because it's really important just to focus on this issue, because now things are getting complex to release them. At least now, maybe we are looking into affording protection to them, because the ceasefire, as you know, that now seems to be holding with many violations. But as far as the situation of the prisoners, I think that the negotiations have been going previously at a snail's pace, and the starvation, the beating, medical neglect, and all other ill treatments are ongoing, and many of them are just dying, and the last one just died 4 days ago.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I mean, at the center of President Trump's peace plan is an exchange. Israel has released several hundred Palestinian prisoners, and they have returned to, in some cases, their family. In other cases, they've been deported to other countries. What sort of a condition were those prisoners in?
Well, as you know, they are definitely better off than just being behind the bars, and they have been always under just ill treatment. At least now they are walking through the door of freedoms. Some of them have moved to freedom to Egypt, and others to the Gaza Strip, while another group moved to the Western Bank. Yet those who are in the Western Bank are always threatened of being just arrested again. And we all understand the living conditions in Gaza are dire. So they have moved from a tragic situation into another, even more worse situation. Those who are in Egypt are waiting for their paperwork to be just cleared so that they would know their final destination. And I think that the procrastination on this issue might really lead to a state of confusion for those who have been liberated, since they need to plan ahead for their life and future, and they are still hanging the balance. They don't know what the future holds for them, and this could have an impact on their capabilities to resume their life naturally and plan ahead in order to have a family, or at least to reunite their families, because some of them are single, others are married and wish to have a family. So this just hanging situation might be an additional burden on their shoulders.
Israel has returned the bodies of more than 200 deceased Palestinian prisoners. Combined with those bodies and the people who have, the surviving prisoners who've been released, you've mentioned that there is evidence and information about their mistreatment in prison. Can you give us some specific examples? For example, do the bodies reveal clues about the circumstances in which they died and the sort of treatment they had?
First of all, the way those deceased bodies have been delivered is catastrophic. And it represents another manifestation of the fact that those who were holding those deceased bodies have failed to respect the international conventions when it comes to on how to deal with those dead bodies. Some of them have been handed over, and we have seen that they were wrapped in piece of cloth, and some of them that had their eyes scorched, and others without heads, injuries across their bodies, which substantiates the fact that those bodies have been maimed. As for the surviving prisoners, on the other hand, all of them have lost around 2/3 of their body weights, and 81 of them just died, and I have a documented list of their names. And the autopsy reports reveal that they died as a result of 3 causes: starvation and intentional medical neglect, and this is just mentioned clearly by the Forensic Medical Center in Israel. So having a ceasefire and the implementation of President Trump has not been reflected in any form or manifestation on the situation of the prisoners, let alone the fact that the families are denied just any access or visit to the prisoners. No other organizations, rights organizations, are allowed just to have access to those detention facilities, even those that are operating in Israel, such as and there are a list of those institutions. Yet Israel seems to be isolating those prisoners from the whole world.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about access to prisoners and visitation rights. And I wondered if you could help me to understand, because presumably you know the law, international law, much better than I do on this particular area. But what are their rights when it comes to visitation and having family visits? And are any of those rights being upheld?
Israel has taken advantage of the 7th of October events and legitimize its rights to carry out all the violations, the egregious violations against international law. The international law stipulates that the families of those prisoners have to receive their bodies and that they should be buried in a very dignified manner. But Israel has failed to comply with those stipulations. On the other hand, Israel, when it comes to the to the living prisoners, they can be visited once a month. But over the last 2 years, no one has been able to visit those prisoners. International organizations, other right organizations that have organized the mode of operations for visiting those detention facilities, such as the Red Cross, which is currently engaged in finding the remaining Israeli hostages. Yet, with this being said, there are hundreds of deceased bodies that have been held as hostages by Israel. Israel justifies this move is in that it is holding them so that they could be used as a bargaining chip in case there will be a negotiation down the road. Now Israel is just delivering the bodies of those who have been killed in acts of genocide in the Gaza Strip. Yet there are hundreds of those dead bodies, more than 155 martyrs who died before the 7th of October. Yet Israel is still holding them, and no deceased has been released at all in exchange for the Israeli dead bodies that have been released so far. So this can tell that Israel has even failed to provide a list of their names or identities, even though that it is the responsibility of the state that has held those hostages, to provide a list of their identities. So even before this 7th of October, Israel seems to be just violating the international law and all other norms. And Israel knows that it can get away with that with impunity. Now, while Itamar Ben Gvir, this extremist minister, is in power and is just running the affairs of the detention facilities and is taking advantage of Netanyahu day and night so that he could just give him a free hand to do whatever he pleases with the prisoners. Therefore, the 10,000 Palestinian prisoners' life is at risk as a result of those criminal policies.
Okay, I've got lots of questions I want to ask you still, and we don't have much time. But I wanted to ask you about Mr. Ben Gvir, because, of course, he visited the most famous, the most high-profile of all the Palestinian prisoners, who is Marwan Barghouti. Now, according to Barghouti's son, he's been attacked by prison guards whilst in prison. At one stage, he lost consciousness. What do we know about his treatment? Do you fear for his life, and do you think he'll be freed?
I think Marwan al-Barghouti has been just exposed to more than an assassination attempt, and as you know, he is now 67 years of age. And we know that he lost consciousness many times. And 81 martyrs also have died as a result in the similar systematic pattern of abuse. And their lives are threatened, just like the rest of the other prisoners. However, Marwan Barghouti has been under mistreatment by the Israeli authorities, especially when there have been calls for his release. And this would put the Israeli leadership confusion, and especially Ben Gvir. Everybody has seen the leaked video that has been posted when he invaded the solitary confinement of Mr. al-Barghouthi. The irony here is that this could be a source of shame for Israel. But, however, this video has been posted and he seems to be just showing arrogance in releasing that. If there were just international community or some rights organization, they should have stopped him, and Marwan al-Barghouthi should have been, and other prisoners should have been released now.
Okay, Mr. Fares, another question I wanted to ask you about. The Knesset has been discussing in Israel a bill that was put forward by Mr. Ben Gvir to introduce the death penalty for what Israel deems to be terrorists. It would apply to anyone who murdered an Israeli citizen, though it would not apply to an Israeli who killed a Palestinian. I would like to ask you, why do you think they're having this discussion now, given the last execution, we understand, in Israel was in 1962?
First of all, the Israeli military law would just allow such practices. Israel is acting as a result of a frustration after all the oppressions and injustice that have been inflicted against the Palestinian people. They have not achieved their stated goal, where the Palestinian people would really bow on their knees. So they believe that they could resort into a new brutal approach that could really just help materialize those goals. Ben Gvir seems to be acting as if he is in a campaign, an endless campaign. He is seeking to win the hearts and minds of some of those extremists in Israel. And Netanyahu is fully aware that such practices, and especially in the Western Bank, have not been quite humanitarian, because when we talk about the public execution, then this could really just backfire and even exacerbate the situation in the Western Bank. And that's why they have refrained from carrying out those executions. But now, as we can see, that Netanyahu has been politically blackmailed by Ben Gvir and Mr. Smotrich, because I believe those two ministers are at the vanguard of this government, and they are taking the lead, and maybe Mr. Netanyahu is just obeying their demands. And the only thing they keep on doing is that they want to topple this government and this coalition. So they are trying to solidify their presence among the voters from the extremist ones, while they realize that they have those elections down the road. Now, discussing the execution, this draft law seems to indicate that that this could be a harbinger of the upcoming elections that might take place early next year and not in November as it was planned.
Okay, and just lastly, Mr. Fares, I want to ask you about a leaked video, which is notorious, it's gruesome. We've covered it on this channel. I expect you've seen it. It shows the abuse of a Palestinian prisoner by IDF soldiers. Prime Minister Netanyahu said it caused enormous reputational damage to Israel, the IDF, and to our soldiers. I'd like to ask you, first of all, how widespread do you think this type of abuse is? And secondly, what went through your mind when you saw that video?
First of all, as I've been just following closely the situation of the prisoners and receiving the reports from their lawyers, so I've been hearing testimonies about what they have been through. And this video is part and parcel of this systematic approach of abuse. It is really shocking. The leaked video is only a drop in the ocean, and there are just many other crimes that have been equally disgusting that have been perpetrated by the IDF and with the accomplice of many other Israeli institutions. As you have seen recently, the Israeli public prosecutor is fed up now and seems to be helpless to stop those crimes, and therefore the public prosecutor decided just to pursue a path that might really put mounting pressure on the government. Some people accuse the public prosecutor of leaking this video, but now she has become, as you understand, a scapegoat. Even in the Israeli mainstream media, everyone is just talking about the genocide, but they have hidden the facts and the instructions that have been given by the security apparatus. So all those crimes just represents one fact: Israel is a coalition, is no more a state, but rather a coalition of criminal groups that have agreed amongst them to insult and degrade the humanity of the Palestinian people. They don't look upon us as a human being and that we have rights, just as the rest of all people on the earth. And apparently the Israeli authorities have given the green light to their just soldiers, to the security personnel, to insult the Palestinian people. And however, this video has been leaked, and as you understand, more than 300 journalists have been killed in Gaza just because they were documenting the genocide crimes in Gaza. And now the Israeli public prosecutor, who, if she gets the opportunity to speak out, then she will be speaking about crimes that we never knew about, that Israel has been covering for some time, and yet this all the facts will be revealed once we gather the testimonies from those prisoners who have been released from the jails, and especially they can tell the stories of their colleagues inside those cells.
Okay, well, we're out of time. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed. Qadura Fares, former head of the Palestinian Prisoners Affairs Committee, thank you very much indeed. Now turning our attention to the United States, where President Donald Trump has taken a hard turn on refugees, announcing a cap of just 7,500 admissions for the coming year. That's a cut of 94% from the Biden-era level and the lowest number in U.S. history. Well, lawmakers say the administration bypassed the legally required consultations with Congress and called the move illegal and invalid, effectively shutting out tens of thousands of already approved refugees who've been waiting for years. Well, let's have an in-depth discussion now with Peter Roff, who's a journalist who joins us from Washington, D.C. Welcome to you, Peter. Great to have you with us. We're also joined by Nassem Haffar, who is a researcher in American affairs and a member of the Democratic Party. Thank you very much indeed, both of you, for joining us. We're going to be talking mostly about immigration. And since you're in New York, Nassem, and since Mamdani, the new mayor-elect of New York, came out with that phrase, "I am an immigrant." Well, indeed he is. He's 34 years old, appeared from nowhere, defied the odds and won the mayoral race. I just wonder what sort of a debate has his election to that top office in New York generated there?
Well, New York is a city with a huge immigrant population. And I think the success of Zohran Mamdani is really a reflection of his ability to bring a lot of these immigrant communities who have no history of voting. He brought them in and encouraged them to go out and vote. Basically, these were marginalized communities, whether it's Bangladeshis or Arab Americans or from Africa. These are communities that historically have not participated in the voting process. He was successful in motivating these communities to come out and vote, and that is really one of the reasons of his success a couple of days ago.
Peter, let me just ask you, you're sort of a bit further away from the action there in Washington, D.C., and I just wondered what sort of impression it had made, do you think, on Americans, broadly speaking, that the largest city in the United States has a Muslim mayor-elect who's young, one of the youngest mayors in many decades. How much debate has this generated across the nation, would you say?
Well, it's, again, good to be with you. Thank you for having me. There isn't a lot of talk about him being a Muslim. There isn't a lot of talk about him being young. There's a lot of talk about him being a socialist. And I think that the Republican Party has decided that they are going to run in 2026 against what they perceive to be the damage that Mamdani is going to do to New York City. Now, it is true that he started the race with 1% of the vote, but you have to look at the candidate field. It was a weak field. The incumbent mayor was highly unpopular and accused of corruption. The only real alternative was a governor who had to resign from office under cloud, who had been guilty of sending COVID patients into nursing homes, spreading the disease and killing people, and then working to cover it up. So it's not surprising that the new mayor is somebody that we hadn't heard of a year ago. The most interesting statistic, though, from the exit polls for me is that Mamdani won the votes of only 3 out of 10 people who were born in New York City. He won the votes of 8 out of 10 people who weren't born there. And he does reflect the cosmopolitan nature of what we understand New York City to be. I grew up just outside New York City. I consider myself a native New Yorker. And I don't think that we should be surprised terribly by this result. I do think that he was able to stitch together an active coalition of everyone who perceives they have a grievance with Donald Trump and the Trump administration, which in a place like New York City is a lot of people. In fact, as we've just seen, it's enough
let me disagree with that.
Mayor.
Okay, Nassem, let me hear what you've got to say about that.
Okay, so a couple of points here. One, the fact that I think his religion was a factor. It was a factor in the sense that it generated opposition from a lot of Islamophobes in the country, not only around the country, but also even in New York City. That's one. Second, I think Mamdani's success, obviously, he motivated the immigrant communities to come out and vote, but also a lot of young voters, not immigrants, but native-born Americans, young voters who found in him somebody who speaks their language, the language of affordability, something that many of our elected people have not really focused on. I think Zohran Mamdani was able to stay on message. Basically, affordability is an issue for a lot of New Yorkers, and that is one of the main reasons he was successful.
Okay, how do you respond to that, Peter?
I agree with everyone that affordability is an issue, especially in a place like New York City, where it's $3,000 a month to rent a closet. The problem is that, and again, even these younger voters were not born in New York. They have come to New York for other parts of the country. 8 out of 10 people who voted for Mamdani were not born in New York City. Okay, they
That's
may
not
have been
true.
born in
Okay,
America.
Nassim, just hold that thought for a second, Nassim. Go ahead, Peter. Just
And
let me
they are
finish your point.
suffering. They are suffering from sticker shock. New York City is a very expensive place to live. Mamdani has made a lot of promises: city government-run grocery stores, free bus rides, rent caps. We'll see if he's able to enforce them and what that does to the marketplace. The problem, as Margaret Thatcher famously said many years ago, with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. And the people who provide the economic resources on which New York runs are threatening to move to places like Florida and Texas, where they have no state income tax, where they will be immune from Mamdani's new tax structure that he's talking about trying to impose on the city. And so what you may have is a wealth flight out of New York, which is actually going to compound the affordability problem rather than resolve it. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out over the next couple of years.
Okay, we need to pivot to the subject of immigration and away from policies in Mamdani's campaign and in the New York mayoral race. But I'll let you respond to that briefly, Nassim, and then we'll move on to discussing immigration.
Okay, so a lot of the young people who voted for Mamdani were not immigrants. Yes, a lot of immigrants voted for him, but also many native-born Americans. In fact, he got 35% of the Jewish vote in New York, and most of these people were young voters, and certainly not immigrants. They were native-born Americans. So that's one thing. As far as
I didn't say they weren't. I just said they weren't born in New York City.
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, 3/4 of New York City people are not born in New York. We have people from across the country. But in any case, just going back to the socialism, going back to the quote unquote socialism question, rent freeze.
It's not a quote unquote socialism question. He calls himself a socialist.
Fine. But as far as some of the issues that he is pushing for, rent freeze on stabilized apartments, that has been done before. This is not a radical idea. It has been done before in New York City. And as far as universal childcare, this is something that I think most, not only New Yorkers, but a lot of people in the US favor, because many working mothers cannot afford to work without having childcare services provided for them. So I think these are issues that I think for a lot of people are very important.
Let's move on to the issue of immigration. It was the hot button issue in the United States. It was a headline story across the world. The ICE raids taking place, a lot of talk about building walls on the southern border. I mean, that seems to have all gone a little bit quiet in recent days and weeks. Peter, is that my imagination?
No, it's not your imagination. And the reason it's gone quiet is because the border between the U.S. and Mexico has the fewest illegal crossings it's had, or attempts at illegal crossings, that it's had in 50 or 60 years, because the first thing that President Trump did when he came into office was effectively shut the border down. That has eased the minds of many Americans for whom immigration, illegal immigration, the problems associated with the porous border was top of mind. They are now focused on the economy. And while the record inflation of the Biden years is no longer with us, it is still too high at 3%, driven again by too much federal spending. And the Trump administration, frankly, has failed to get its hands around the problem of prices. And so the affordability problem not only affects New York City, but it affects places all over the country. I think you saw some of that in the election returns in New Jersey and Virginia on Tuesday, where the Democrats romped to easy victories in what are generally Democratic areas. But people are unhappy with how expensive things are. And Trump now owns the issue, and he has not focused enough on increasing productivity and economic growth in order to get prices down.
Okay, Nassim, what's your assessment? Do you think this issue of affordability, the economy more broadly, has eclipsed immigration precisely for the reasons that Peter was just giving us there? The lowest number of illegal border crossings on the southern border since 1970. Does that mean job done? Let's move on to another issue.
Well, I think, look, the immigration issue was a negative for the Democratic Party in the presidential elections because I think it was mishandled by the Biden administration. Having said that, the Democrats and Republicans in the Senate were on the verge of agreeing on an immigration policy, but then Trump, who was running for elections at that point, decided to torpedo those negotiations. And that's the reason why an immigration policy or an immigration agreement in Congress failed to materialize. Now, I think right now, immigration, it is true, it has not or was not a factor in the elections over the last couple of days. Having said that, I think many Americans are unhappy with the way that ICE, the immigration officers, are arresting people masked, with their faces masked. It's like, I think for many people, this is something that they did not ask for, and it's going to really hurt the Republican Party going forward.
Peter, your thoughts? This is going to backfire, says Nassem, on the Republican Party, especially those masked officers. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it does, especially when confronted with the truth that people understand what's going on here. The reason that the ICE officials are wearing masks and they're not wearing name tags is because they're being photographed and doxxed. Doxxed is when your picture and address are posted on the internet so people can go find you. The cartels have bounties on immigration officers, harassment, everything from harassment up to outright murder. And so they have to do this to protect themselves, and they're going after high-value targets, criminal illegals who are not just criminals because they entered the United States illegally or overstayed their visas, but who have committed crimes either in the country they came from or here in the United States. And I think we have every right, as every country does, to go after people who break laws and say you're not welcome here. Now, I think that where the Republicans have really gone wrong is that they have allowed the immigration message to be taken over by people who say they don't want foreigners in the country. And there's on the list of stupid public policy choices, that's in the top 5. America was built by immigrants. America thrives because of the influx of immigrants. The reason that our population is at replacement rate, unlike every other Western democracy, is because of immigrants. And the people who come here largely are the ones who want to work hard and make a better life for themselves and for their children and grandchildren. And we all benefit from that activity. It's the rising tide lifts all boats phenomenon. They help raise the tide. We want immigrants in America. We especially want educated, skilled immigrants, but we want immigrants. We need immigrants. We just need them to come through a lawful process so that we know who's here and so that the public sector isn't overwhelmed. And there's a resistance to fixing that policy without being willing to grant amnesty to everyone who broke the law to come here. There has to be some kind of a compromise. I think
Let me push back on that.
But that would require a reduction in the politics that surround the issue.
Okay, Nassem, it doesn't sound like you agree with the idea that the Trump administration and these ICE raids are going after the right people. What are your thoughts?
Of course, they're not. When Trump was running for president, he said basically that they will focus on removing immigrants or refugees or undocumented immigrants who have committed crimes. The reality is most of the people that are being arrested or kidnapped with masked ICE officers are not or have not committed crimes. In fact, they're just people who have been around for 20 years, 25, 30 years, working, paying taxes. And I think that's really the problem that a lot of people in the U.S. are seeing. And they don't want, nobody wants masked people coming in, kidnapping people away from their
One at a
children.
time, gentlemen. Let's let Nassem finish his point.
Nobody, I think most Americans are not happy with the fact that masked ICE officers or immigration officers go arrest people in front of their children, taking them and not knowing, basically, and their families not knowing where they end up. I think that's a problem that most Americans do not support.
Peter.
There's no survey data to indicate that. I think most Americans, frankly, don't care. If they believe that criminal activity is being suppressed, that cartels and gang members are the ones being arrested and detained and deported, if that's what's happening, and according to the official statistics released by ICE, that is what's happening. Tom Homan, the president's immigration control czar, has made that very clear. I think that they are largely supportive of the activity. There are a fringe of people who are out there paid by political interests, some of them foreign, who are deliberately trying to stir up trouble around this issue. But I don't think it's something that most Americans lie in bed at night worried about. I think they lie in bed worried about whether or not they're going to have a job, what the cost of their health care is going to be, how much it costs for a dozen eggs, and whether or not they're going to be able to keep their house because of their mortgage payment. Some of the economic indicators are good, and the overall health of the economy is strong. Wages need to be rising faster and higher. Federal spending needs to come down. Interest rates need to come down. The president can't control that, but he needs to get a handle on spending. And I'm hopeful that once the government shutdown issue is resolved, and it is resolved through a clean continuing resolution without continuing these outrageous Medicaid subsidies, that we will have a conversation about how to get spending back under control. We know inflation comes when too much money is injected into the system. And under Biden, we had 4 years of continual, what they called economic stimulus, that was just driving inflation up and up and up.
Okay, Nassem, I saw you shaking your head a little bit there. What did you want to say?
Well, first of all, as far as the Medicaid subsidies or Medicare subsidies that the individual was talking about, well, let's face the reality here. If without those subsidies that the Democrats are pushing for, medical insurance rates will skyrocket for millions and millions of Americans. Now, the gentleman from across the side from me, basically he does not think, or he agrees with the fact that tax cuts should continue. The tax cuts that Trump implemented in his first term. He says those should continue, but Medicare subsidies or healthcare subsidies.
I didn't say a word about the tax cuts.
That's the problem.
Please don't put words in my mouth. I didn't say a word about the tax cuts.
Can we stick to immigration? Let's pivot back to immigration as quickly as possible.
Sure.
Okay. So I disagree with what the gentleman said, that the people who are being arrested are criminals. I think most of them are law-abiding people who do their work. But the fact that what the gentleman is saying, that Americans don't care that masked individuals are arresting people away from their families, I think I disagree with that 100%. I think most Americans don't want that, don't want to see parents being snatched away from their families and having their children basically be homeless.
You may think that the people being arrested are law-abiding, or largely law-abiding.
Most of them are.
They are also criminals because they're here illegally. But the official statistics show that not to be the case. I think if the Republican Party doesn't get it right on immigration, which is that we are opposed to illegal immigration, but we love immigrants and we welcome them because they are actually much more in line with the free market vision of the economy than they are with the socialist vision of the economy. And they are necessary to continue the American system and the American way of life. It will cost them badly at the polls. They think they're talking to a small group of people when they're actually talking to a large group of people, people like Japanese Americans and Indian Americans and Pakistani Americans and Vietnamese Americans and Polish Americans and Czech Americans and Serbian Americans, all of whom are high net worth by population group and ought to be supporting Republican candidates who want them to be able to keep more of what they worked so hard and came so far to earn. Instead, the nativist language is pushing them into the hands of the Democratic Party that wants to tax their wealth out of existence. It's nonsensical that the Republicans don't understand this.
Okay, Nassem, your thoughts on that. And also, I just want to put a question out to both of you, which is that when we did an assessment of President Trump's first 6 months in office, there were Democrats who told us that they thought, in fact, that President Trump had done a good job when it came to meeting his promises and tackling the issue of immigration in the United States. And Nassem, I'm wondering, as a Democrat, what you think of that. Do you think President Trump has, despite what it sounds like you think he's made some miscalculations, or you might not have liked everything he's done, but broadly speaking, do you think he's done what he said he was going to do? Do you think this is a case of promises made, promises kept?
Well, from that perspective, yes. I mean, he did. I would agree with that. He did say that he wants to stop immigrants' flow from the southern borders. And by all measures, that seems to have been the case, that he has succeeded in doing that. My problem is there needs to be an immigration policy that Democrats and Republicans should agree on. And the fact that President Trump torpedoed an agreement that was in the works before he got elected. There was an agreement that Republicans came up with that Democrats signed off on. He torpedoed that because he wanted to get elected. So I think there needs to be an immigration policy that, in many respects, supports what the gentleman said. We do need immigrants coming legally and lawfully into the country. But I think we have not been able to reach an agreement, Republicans and Democrats, putting a policy in place so that we don't have the problems that we have at the southern border.
And speaking of the southern border, Peter, what happened to the idea of the wall? Where are we on that? Because some of our viewers will be wondering.
It's still out there. It's still live. There's still construction. But because the flow of people across the border has been reduced to a trickle, the need for it, the urgency for it isn't felt like it was. I mean, Trump was elected, I think, in 2024, largely with the assignment to shut the border. 12, 14 million people minimum came across the border illegally in the 4 years of Joe Biden. No country, even a country of 300 million people like the United States, can absorb that kind of a shock without tremendous economic disruption. And I think we felt that. He has kept that promise. Now he's got to focus on economics, and he's got to get a handle on the prices. And I will say, frankly, in my view, the tariffs aren't helping. Tariffs are taxes. They're inflationary. They raise prices. They reduce productivity. They reduce exports. Not good. We do need an immigration deal. We need a new immigration system, but it needs to be a good deal. The deal that blew up, regardless of who blew it up or why, wasn't a good deal. I like very much the idea that President Trump has put forward of the golden ticket, the ability to buy H-1B visas, high-tech, high specialization visas, and for people with high net worth to buy citizenship here in the United States. I think it is a wonderful idea to have wealth refugees coming to the United States, their fortunes intact as U.S. citizens. America lost out immeasurably because we wouldn't move the people who wanted to leave Hong Kong to the head of the line seeking citizenship when Hong Kong was taken over by the People's Republic of China. Where did they all go? Vancouver, Canada, which is now a booming economic metropolis because it's been flooded with wealth. That wealth could have come to the west coast of the United States. That wealth could be put to use creating jobs and expanding the economy here in America. But we were stupid. We said, no, you have to wait in line. Well, they didn't have time to wait in line, and they didn't want to come as refugees. They wanted to come as citizens. We should have let them buy their way in. That's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that I think Donald Trump is capable of, that other politicians aren't, that could actually point the way towards a robust immigration system from which we all benefit.
Okay, just a couple of minutes left. Nassem, your thoughts on this out-of-the-box thinking by President Trump and the sort of the golden ticket style. What do you think?
I have no problem with a golden ticket, to bring wealthy people in the U.S. That's fine. But let's keep one thing in mind. The U.S. has a history of taking refugees who are not wealthy, they're poor, they are coming from famine situations, and they come into this country and they do very well. They build businesses. I mean, let's talk about the Irish in the 19th century who were fleeing starvation. The refugees after World War II, including many Jewish refugees, Cubans and Russians fleeing communism, Vietnam refugees. All these people came into this country without means, but they settled, they created businesses, they hired people, and they are very successful. So yes, if the gentleman wants people who are wealthy to come in, that's fine. But also our history of accepting refugees should continue, because I think those refugees have proven that they can be very successful and they build businesses that will hire Americans.
Okay, just before we wrap up, let me start by asking you, Nassem. I mean, we're coming up to the midterm. Well, we're a year away from the midterms, but we're about to sort of enter midterm season. Based on everything we've talked about, everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, would you say immigration is going to be the hot button issue going into those elections, or just one of perhaps a number of issues?
I don't think it's going to be the hot issue. I think affordability, and frankly, what we've seen over the last 9 months or a year of the Trump family enriching themselves in various ways, I think those two, affordability and the Trump administration or Trump family accumulating wealth over the last 9 to 10 months, those are going to be the two main issues.
Okay, Nassem, you had the first word in this debate. Let's give Peter the last word. Peter, your thoughts?
I think, as always, economy and jobs are going to be the number one issue. And which party do you trust more to handle the economic challenges of the future is what most people will be casting their votes on. I think that the Democratic strategy of just saying Trump, Trump, Trump over again has worn thin with the voters. They want solutions. And I think that both in New Jersey and in Virginia, we saw that the Democrats offered more in the way of solutions than the Republican candidates, which is why you had a greater turnout among Democrats than Republicans from over what they were 4 years ago by significant numbers. The basic concerns right now, and I think Nassem is correct, have to do with affordability. So it's going to be the economy and jobs. I don't expect immigration, except as a part of the jobs conversation. There are people who foolishly argue that immigrants take jobs and affordable housing away from regular Americans. They call themselves Republicans, but I don't think of them as Republicans. I just think of them as stupid. And I'd like for them to crawl back under the rocks they came out from under. I want to be talking about, and I think the country needs to hear what the plans are to get the economy growing so that wages rise and prices are no longer giving you an attack of sticker shock every time you go online to buy something.
Okay. All right, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Peter Roff, journalist in Washington, D.C. Thank you to you. Nassem Haffar, researcher in American Affairs and Democratic Party member. Thank you very much indeed to you as well.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more on these recent elections in the United States. We can speak to Dr. David Ramadan, who's a former Republican representative from Virginia, professor of political science at George Mason University. He joins us from a stone's throw from the White House in Washington, D.C. Dr. Ramadan, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
Thanks for having me, Tom. I'm literally in the Hay Adams Hotel across the street from the beautiful White House.
Okay, well, the dust has now settled from these various elections in New York, New Jersey, Virginia. The first major election since President Trump returned to the White House. What do the results tell us, do you think?
A rebuttal to President Trump and his policies. These after presidential elections, it's only in Virginia, New Jersey, and of course New York now became a hotbed because of the Mamdani candidacy. But Virginia normally, where I live and work, is the bellwether for after elections or after presidential elections. The first election takes place after presidential. And in Virginia, whereby the governor is a Republican, the lieutenant governor is a Republican, the attorney general is a Republican, the Democrats swept all three statewide offices on Tuesday, flipping it from Republican to Democrat with a huge margin, 15 plus points on top. And they swept 13 new seats in the Virginia House of Delegates, the Virginia Parliament, to give Democrats a majority of 64 versus 36 for Republicans. It was clear rebuttal to President Trump's policies and a mandate for Democrats that were talking, at least in Virginia, on kitchen table issues, affordability issues, the government shutdown that we are living in right now, the high tariffs or anti-high tariffs that we're dealing with nowadays, which are taxes on Americans, and unfortunately, everybody's feeling that cost in their day-to-day and paychecks. Okay,
sure. And I mean, we've talked a lot on this channel about Zohran Mamdani in New York. So perhaps it would be nice to talk a little bit more about the candidate closer to your home, Abigail Spanberger, who flipped the Virginia governorship with a double-digit win. I mean, we've got these two very different characters, haven't we? I mean, Mamdani off to the far left, Spanberger sort of closer to the center. And I'm just wondering, do you think the Democratic Party needs to make a decision at some point fairly soon? Does it want to be more like Mamdani? Does it want to be more like Spanberger? Which is it?
Absolutely. It is a challenge for the Democratic Party. Both won elections, and both won elections handedly. One in Virginia, one in New York. The question becomes, which model of Democrats are they going to follow or use for the rest of the country for the upcoming congressional elections in 2026? The Spanberger model is a center-left, pragmatic, not partisan type of policy and politics that gained 70+% of independent voters in Virginia yesterday. Mamdani's style of politics is a far left. He calls himself a socialist Democrat, sorry. And that is truly a far left model that will work in only few areas of the country. So if they go with that, they're not going to gain as many seats as they did in 2026. If they do go with the Spanberger model, Democrats are expected to flip Congress in 2026 and gain a lot of seats.
Right. So Mamdani wouldn't have worked in Virginia, would he?
No, absolutely. Mamdani would have lost in Virginia by double digits versus Spanberger won in Virginia by double digits, and both are Democrats.
Okay. I mean, according to opinion polls, the Democrats' image remains still pretty unpopular. I mean, they seem to have a bit of a communication issue as well. And Democrats have told us this as well, that they aren't very good at discussing these, I think you call them the kitchen table issues, rent, groceries, inflation, affordability, gas prices. These are the things that people appeared to be most worried about going into these elections. Do you think they've managed to get that everyman touch back? Have they managed to work out how to connect with voters better, do you think?
I think it depends. They don't have a national figure as a problem, right? Who is speaking and talking about these kitchen table issues. What they have are individuals in different states that are doing so. Both, interestingly enough, even Mamdani, who is a democratic socialist, who was talking about limiting and with a populist message, he also was talking about kitchen table issues, right? He was talking about rent. He was talking about affordability. It's just what he wanted to do with it. He wanted full government control, which is not something that resonates with independents, certainly not with Republicans, and with the high number of Democrats. Versus Spanberger, who talked about rent and expenses and the American dream and affordability and education. However, she didn't inject government to control it as Mamdani did. So they know what to do. They know what they need to do at least. And depending on which state they will have candidates that can do it, they will remain, Democrats will remain short on a national figure that does that. And that's normal. They don't have a national leader. When you have a president who is a Republican, it's the Republicans that have a national leader. Like him or not, he is the voice of the Republican Party, and he is the solo voice of the Republican Party. When you don't have a Democratic president in office, there is no solo voice of the Democratic Party. So you're going to see people that run the gamut from the very far left of Mamdani to the center left of Abigail Spanberger.
And just looking ahead towards next year, one of the other things that's happened this week is there's been a bit of a redrawing of the congressional map in California as well, which could improve the Democrats' odds of winning more representation from California. I mean, do you think taking that into account, taking the latest indicators from these elections into account, we're likely to see the House of Representatives flip in November next year?
Yeah, this is truly a problem for the country overall. It's not good for America to be gerrymandering. We were going towards a direction of bipartisan or apartisan redistricting through commissions versus legislative bodies doing so. Unfortunately, and normally we do redistricting every 10 years after the census. We never do it mid-decade. We do it at the beginning of the decade all over the nation. Unfortunately, President Trump, fearing that he would lose the House of Representatives in Congress next year, asked Texas to start a redistricting effort mid-decade so that the Texas maps will be more preferential to Republican candidates, and they could hopefully, in his mind, would mitigate losses in Congress next year and keep control of the House. Well, that opened up a can of worms. California, Virginia, now Pennsylvania, and several others that are controlled by Democrats are considering and started the process. California's ballot 50 went through. Virginia has fast-forwarded a constitutional amendment so that they can move away from the commission, bipartisan, well, even though there's no such thing as bipartisan because people are appointed from both sides of the aisle to these commissions, but an effort at least to be done not by legislators, but by independent or other voters that will come in and draw these commissions. Now they moved away from that, and we're reverting back to where the politicians are the ones who are drawing these districts. This will definitely end up, along with the climate of anti-Trump today, in Democrats winning the House next year.
And just lastly, Dr. Ramadan, I mean, I've got one more question for you, but I want to get your comment on one observation I heard from one commentator who said 2024 was a dumpster fire for the Democrats. 2025 might be the fire hose. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, could be. Absolutely. I mean, it was a fire hose that is used as fire hoses are used during street problems, for example, where you're fire hosing down the other side. This time they did fire hose the other side. I mean, the sweep in Virginia, and then the elections in Jersey and California with a 15-point. It is definitely a pro-democratic climate. It's definitely a year, and it's expected that 2026 will do the same. And we know that because the margins were so high in 2025. If Democrats have won by only 2 or 3 points in 2025, we would say this is only 2025. It's not a climate. It's not a wave. It's not going to sustain through 2026. But since they won by 15, 16 points in a purple state like Virginia, then the expectation is that they will have a very preferable climate for elections in 2026 and be able to gain Congress back, at least the House of Representatives.
Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Dr. David Ramadan, former Republican representative from Virginia, professor of political science at George Mason University. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for a look back at some of the top interviews of the week. Until then, bye-bye.